So the first internet provider that we're going to talk about here is satellite internet. And there are two companies that you typically see for satellite internet. HughesNet is the most popular. And then they used to be Wild Blue. I actually just found this out today that they're now Viasat. So both of these companies use a satellite that has to be mounted at your house, and that retrieves the satellite signal. It tends to be very, very slow. We're talking between, if you ever remember using dial-up internet, it feels a lot like dial-up internet. It's not much faster. So it's definitely the least preferred method of all of them to be used for internet. If you have access to one of the other options, definitely take that. So our next internet provider type is DSL or hotspots. So DSL uses a phone line connection. So you would use your phone company like CenturyLink or Verizon. I think those are the only two that are available in this area right at the moment. And CenturyLink, you know, if you can avoid getting DSL internet and you can go with Comcast, do so, because it's going to be much better speeds. Especially in this area, CenturyLink does not work very well. The lines that are here are very outdated, and they are not really updating or replacing them. So we've had a lot of clients who've been unhappy with their service, some that have gone weeks without internet access and no solution, because it's just taking a long time for them to fix those things. So Verizon DSL is not really available in this area, but we have a lot of clients that are in like Emmitsburg and Thurmont, so that's an option in those areas rather than CenturyLink. And then your cellular hotspot connection, of course, would be off of your cell phone. So speeds are really going to vary a lot depending on who your provider is and what amount of speed they're providing you, and also the area that you're in and the strength of the signal. And then we have lastly cable and Fios. This is going to be the fastest option that's available for most people if you can get Comcast. Of course, they're going to have different speed ratings, which we'll talk more about here in a minute, but the different speeds that are available are going to be higher than what the other companies have. And we also have Verizon Fios. I just listed that one here as another example. This is not something that's available in our area. It is available in larger metro areas like Baltimore, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, that kind of thing. But it's pretty fast. It can go just as fast as most Comcast high-end connections can. So let's talk a little bit about the differences between DSL and cable. When you have a DSL connection, like I said, you're using a phone line. So that phone line is coming direct to your house. That amount of speed that's coming from the pole to your house is yours. You own that speed. So what I mean by that is when you are using Comcast with a cable connection, you actually have a node or one location that's being fed all the internet access, and then from there it's going to all the other houses in that area. So because of the way that Comcast is connected, you may actually find that at certain times of day your speeds go down, especially when the kids get off school, when they're in school. Around that 3 o'clock, 3:30 time, you might see that your speed declines if you're on cable. And that's because you're actually sharing whatever speed is coming into that node. So there are some advantages and disadvantages when you look at it that way, whereas you're getting the amount of speed that you're paying for. You should be getting the amount of speed you're paying for, although a lot of people haven't been lately. With CenturyLink, that's how you can know the difference between those two connection types. So Comcast, you're sharing the connection with other houses around you, essentially. And when you have DSL or a straight connection, it's coming directly from the pole, and that speed is your speed. Do we have any questions? All right, so our next topic here is troubleshooting connections. There's a couple of questions that you want to consider before you troubleshoot your connection. First, you want to determine, is your connection wired or wireless? So do you have a cable going from your modem or your internet box directly to your device? If that's the case, then you shouldn't have any other troubleshooting to do on the device itself as long as the connection is identified. If you're using a wireless device, there may be some additional troubleshooting steps that you need to take. And then you also want to consider, are other devices working on the network? So if you have one device that's working just fine wirelessly, and you have a second device that's not working on that connection wirelessly, then it's possible that the problem is with the second device and not the actual internet connection. Sometimes there can be configuration issues inside of the software for the drivers that can cause it to not use the wireless adapter properly, and sometimes those can be updated and resolved. So we're going to talk about how you can generally troubleshoot an internet connection, and this will apply if you have a wired device or a wireless device. It doesn't matter. So the very first step that you want to do is you want to locate the modem that your internet provider either rented to you, sold to you, or that you purchased. If you have Comcast or CenturyLink, usually they have their company name on the front of the box there, but it can vary. So you may have a modem and a router in some cases. If you have a box that has a phone line or a cable connection going to it, and then you have a second box, usually with antennas on the outside, then you probably have a router. So if you have a modem and a router, when you're troubleshooting your internet connection, you want to disconnect power from both of those devices. So the easiest way to do that is just pull the power plug out of the back. They usually don't have power buttons on them, so it's easy to just pull it out of the back. And you want to check and make sure all of the lights have gone off on the modem and the router. Some modems, especially Comcast modems, have a backup battery that might be installed. So you want to make sure that it is all the way off. Once you've confirmed that the power on both devices are off, you want to wait 5 minutes to restart your device. Now, if you have a modem and a router, you want to boot up your modem first and wait the full 5 minutes before you start your router up, and then give that another 5 minutes before restarting with your device. If you still don't have an internet connection and you're not getting any connection on a wired connection, you should check your internet provider to see if they have an outage. So a lot of times if you can get on your cell phone, like for Comcast, they have an outage center on their website once you log in. Although I will tell you, if there's an outage and it's new, it's not always helpful because they haven't always reported it right away. But you can check there before you call them. A question here, if we are using Wi-Fi at home for our cell phones, is there a way to reduce interference when two people are on the... Okay, so having different wireless connections can definitely cause different varying interferences, but it really depends on your situation. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that, Jim, so we can try to sort that out, no problem. Any other questions about the troubleshooting steps that we went over here about restarting your modem and router? All right, great. So at this point, if you've restarted your devices and they're still not working, you can check with your internet provider, and you can also restart your computer or your cell phone, whatever you're trying to connect with, just to make sure that's not an issue. All right, so we're going to move on to the next topic here, which is cellular hotspots. So more and more we're seeing people use their cell phones to connect other devices like their computer or their gaming devices to the internet using like a piggyback. So basically how a hotspot works is you have a cell phone or a little device that gets your cell provider service, whether it's Sprint or AT&T or what have you, and it sends out a wireless signal so that other devices can utilize that, just like your modem or your router at home, except you can take this device anywhere. On your cell phone, sometimes you have the option to turn on a cellular hotspot, but not all plans include that. So you'll have to try it. If it tells you it's not enabled or you can't turn it on, then you may have to contact your cellular provider and see what plans include that and what options that you have. You want to also be aware of data limits that are on your plan, because using a hotspot is going to use up the data on your cell phone plan, and typically you have a limit on how much you can use. Prepaid plans typically don't have a lot of data available to them. So if you are going to use other devices on your hotspot, you have the option, at least on Windows devices, to set your connection as a metered connection. And you'll see this usually when you connect to a wireless network the first time, or it'll be down in the bottom right-hand corner where you can click on your wireless networks. You'll see an option for properties, and in that screen you'll have the option to set your network as metered. So what that does is it limits the amount of data that's being used for background applications. It's kind of prioritizing what do you want to allow to use the data and what do you not want to allow it. So in Windows 10, you actually have even more that you can go into detail with the metered connection settings. You can turn certain apps on and off for internet access, or you can just have the metered connection turned on and let Windows configure it. So basically, one of the biggest advantages of using the metered connection is that it won't get big, huge updates like for Windows. If you're using a hotspot exclusively for your internet, you're not going to want to download these 5, 6, 7 gigabyte updates and use up your whole data connection. So if you use that limited connection, you'll be able to avoid some of those bigger updates while still getting the security ones. And then we can always update your computer here if you get a regular cleanup or things like that. One disadvantage to using the metered connection is it might limit things that you don't want it to limit. I have seen in a couple situations where because of a metered connection, a printer driver wouldn't update. And because it wouldn't allow that driver to update, the printer wouldn't work. So we had to disable the metered connection temporarily before we were able to do that. So one way that you can check your internet connection to make sure that it's running the way that you want it to be is to do a speed test. If you go to Google, for example, and type speed test in there, Google has a speed test that it'll do right from the search engine. Or I like to use speedtest.net, that's another one. But I will tell you it's very heavy on the ads. So the Google speed test is probably a little bit easier to use. So if you open up your web browser, you want to make sure that there's no other devices that are using the internet to get an accurate internet speed test. And if you have a wired device, do your speed test on that. Because a wired connection is always going to have a faster internet speed than a wireless speed. You're dependent upon your equipment if you're testing it wirelessly. So you won't get an accurate speed test that way. But you can get a general idea. So when you perform the speed test, you'll be able to get an idea of the speed that your connection is giving you and compare that with what your internet provider is supposed to be providing you with. If you're not getting the speeds that you are supposed to be getting, then you'll want to investigate with your internet provider to see if there's an issue on their end, and then you can investigate your modem or your equipment at home. And then thirdly, your devices, we can always test them here on our connection to see if they're getting our maximum speeds versus what you're getting. If you're getting slower speeds or you have a slower connection, then you're not going to be able to do things like streaming videos or online gaming. So, you know, Netflix, things like that. It's heavier on the system. So those who are on satellite, not even really going to work at all. DSL, you'll be able to use it, but it's going to be harder when you have several different computers or devices that are trying to use that connection at the same time.